Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new session of memoQ webinars. I am Gonzalo from KeepGrade's marketing team. Today, we will be presenting our latest release, memoQ 8.4. And today's session will be delivered by Gergely Vander, who is the product manager of memoQ. So before we give the floor to Gergely, let me tell you a few details. If you have questions during this session, you can add them to the questions panel, and we will go through these questions at the very end of the session, once his presentation is over. Sometimes we don't have time to answer all of these questions, but don't worry, because we will send a follow-up email with answers to every question, plus the webinar recording. So now let's the presentation start, and welcome, Gergely.
Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to talk about memoQ 8.4, our latest feature release. And I'm going to cover the functionality of the new release and maybe in some cases show some of it in action. We'll see how it goes because I'm a little bit terrified of my time limit of half an hour. Okay, let's go. Perhaps a bit surprisingly, I'd like to start with something that is not really new functionality, but more of an introduction of our somewhat new approach to getting users involved and helping our users help us improve our products. There are two main initiatives that we have started. One is the Design Lab, which is an initiative to actively involve willing users to help us directly with product planning, design, testing, and refinement. This is for this program, you can sign up on our website. And if you do, we will invite you to take part in various surveys, interviews, usability tests, different kinds of activities where you can help us in these different phases of making our products and features happen. And the other thing is probably the bolder one of the two, considering what has happened to Facebook recently, for example. This is our program to start collecting usage data from memoQ desktop users. This is a completely optional feature that you can enable when you first start up memoQ 8.4 or any later release. And anything that is collected from your usage of memoQ is completely anonymous. And we are not, unlike, for example, Facebook or Google, we are not using anything personal. We are frankly not really interested in individuals or individual businesses like translation companies who use our product. The only goal that we have is to get factual data that can help us improve the product. We very clearly we have no other business goals with this thing at all. And we are quite open about how the whole thing works, what we collect, when and how. On the same window that pops up when you first start memoQ 8.4, you can click a link to get to a page on our website that explains the usage data collection feature. And there is, deep inside that page, you can also click another link to get an actual factual list of everything that we are collecting, and we are going to keep that list updated. Also, for technically inclined users, actually you can take a look at the data that memoQ collects about your usage of the tool. So this is inside a SQLite database files. Obviously, you need some technical knowledge to get to it, but it is there. So what we collect about you is readable for you as well. We do not encrypt it, we do not hide it from you. And quickly, I'd like to give a few examples of what we are collecting, just to get you an idea. For example, we are going to collect completely anonymous information about the files you import for translation, like file types, where you import it. Do you import it into local projects, or do you import it into an online project? And various similar information about the files that you work with. But never any kind of file name, never any kind of username, never any kind of company name, never any kind of customer name. We are not interested in any of that. Another example is that is when you are working with a memoQ server, we are collecting information about how much time you need to wait to get a complete list of projects, how many projects are there, whether you are a project manager of those projects or an administrator user, and so on and so forth. These are all pieces of data that we use to get flashy reports that can hopefully enable us to build better features and a better product overall with time. And speaking of memoQ servers, just another thing, or another safety measure, or another level of protecting your privacy is that even though it is only memoQ desktop itself, so the desktop program that is collecting information, some of that information can have some relation to the company you work for and their memoQ server, like the number of projects on a memoQ server that you work with. And we have added another opt-in window for memoQ server administrators so that they can prevent sharing this type of information, which means that if they disable it, then the memoQ desktop users, like project managers, translators, their memoQ copies will not send any kind of data about that specific memoQ server. And obviously, I'm hoping several things. We are hoping that many of you will opt in. Actually, we have the parliamentary elections coming up in Hungary, and I was thinking about this and comparing this to democracy. If you take part in this program, then how you use memoQ will affect what happens with memoQ's future. And this is very similar to taking part in an election. Yeah, I don't know what the other thing was that I wanted to say. Maybe I will remember. Okay. And still remaining on topics that are not about new features or not about new functionality. We are putting a lot of emphasis nowadays on performance and responsiveness. And with 8.4, you are going to see the first signs of this, both as translators and project managers and other users of memoQ itself, and also as businesses and administrators working and using memoQ servers. On the memoQ desktop side, we put in a lot of effort, and we are putting a lot of effort every day to improve the responsiveness of the user interface. memoQ has an awful lot of windows with sometimes with complex functionality, and admittedly, some of those are not working optionally. And for 8.4, we have already improved the responsiveness and speed of some of these interfaces. For example, if you work in projects or open and close documents, project windows, your dashboard, where you switch the various screens of a project, like going onto the translation memory space, live docs page, then the interface will be snappier and more natural and quicker to respond to your actions. And these are really just the first low-hanging fruits, and 8.5 will probably contain even more of these improvements and probably even more dramatic ones. And it's probably not even too late to affect this. So if you have some pet peeves about memoQ performance, then we are eager to hear about them. Maybe not for 8.5, but 8.6 or the upcoming versions, we can solve those. This is an ongoing effort. In the case of memoQ server, obviously performance is even more important there, or maybe at least similarly important. And we targeted one specific pain point for this release, which is the speed of backing up a memoQ server. If you talk to IT people or server administrators that need to work with memoQ servers, they will tell you that there is a huge amount of data there, all the projects, all the resources, all that sometimes huge amount of information that is stored. And actually, it's really not instant to create a backup of such a server. So we are putting in effort, and we have improved this already for version 8.4. And the improvements will be quite significant for memoQ servers that are in machines with hard disks. And in those cases when an SSD is used, then the improvements will not be that dramatic. And this is also another field where we are going to add further improvements with upcoming versions. Also with previous releases of, last release and maybe the one before that, we've been working on terminology, and we still had some significant improvements that we couldn't finish. And we are adding these with 8.4. I think probably at least on the memoQ side, we are probably ending this round of improvements, or more or less. So at least we are not working on huge improvements anymore. But for 8.4, we have made a number of changes. I think the most significant for translators and maybe even translation teams in some cases is the ability to enable or disable the use of a term base for quality assurance. I think there is at least a double use case for term bases, or from this aspect, at least from the aspect of quality assurance. So sometimes you use term bases for very strictly prescribed terminology, something that your client wants you to use and follow. And sometimes you use term bases to improve efficiency. You just quickly add your terms as you work, and or quickly add terms as you work in a team to just improve efficiency and the speed of translation. And when it gets to running a quality check, or especially running a quality check for your client or customer, you can differentiate this and say that for the prescribed terminology, they will be used in QA, and for your working terminology, QA can skip those. It's actually implemented in a very simple way. I will just quickly show you. There is another column of checkboxes in the list of term bases in the project, and you can click the QA checkbox or uncheck it. And this tells memoQ whether or not to use that term base in QA. In the term base editor, we have made it easier to identify forbidden terms. That's another thing that is very easy to show. Maybe I can jump in and quickly show it to you. So for example, let's imagine that this translation is forbidden for English translations. Then you just go to the usage tab of that term, click the forbidden term checkbox, and then up in the list you will see that this term is marked as forbidden now. And there are various other small features there. One of them is the ability to find terms that have notes attached to them. Also, we have made it possible to include images in exported term bases, and also obviously also import on back. This is a new feature for memoQ, which was already there in our web-based terminology tool called QTerm. Also, the two pieces of software now work together better in this regard. And there is just one small usability improvement. Export settings are remembered now as you choose them, and you don't need to change them every time. Another thing that we've been improving in this release and also the previous one is the termic spectrum module. For this version, we have added default stop word lists for some new languages. I think previously we only had it for English or maybe a couple of languages, and we have added it for some more languages. I wonder if I'll be able to show it to you right now. Yes, so here is the list. The ones that we have added with 8.4, you can identify by the version number next to them. So Polish, Portuguese, Russian, Hungarian, and Spanish. Again, we have made a number of small usability improvements in the process of actually extracting terms. For example, the terms that you dropped during the extraction, you can easily add them as a stop word list now. Okay. I have said a few words about QTerms and now a few words more. Again, I think these are, again, a bunch of quality of life improvements for users. When there are external users who have access to your QTerm term bases, for example, reviewers working for you, or maybe even your customers in some cases, when they log in to memoQ Web, and they will be taken directly to QTerm and directly to the search box when they can look up terminology. And for any user who searches in QTerm, we have made the search options clearer. Before that, I think we had some graphical buttons that were probably a bit opaque and difficult to understand. Now we have made them clearer and included probably quite obvious begins with type search as well. And again, search settings are remembered. One feature that might not be that widely known about QTerm is that there are relations between terms and term-based entries, like synonyms, antonyms, and there, again, a small change there is that, or a small improvement there is that whenever you define a logically symmetrical relation like a synonym, then the other side of the relation will also receive it. So if you say that A is a synonym of B, then B will also be automatically be the synonym of A. Okay. With document import and export, I think this is typically a section that I include every time I talk about a new feature release, but I think this is somewhat special because we are starting to support zip files. So if you, for example, if you repeatedly receive zip files from a client of yours to translate, then from now on, you do not need to do the stupid manual work of unpacking the files, selecting which files need translation, then feeding them to memoQ, finishing translation, and then repacking them. All of this can be made automatic in the new release. And inside zip files, you are able to choose what types of files to import and also how to import them. And you can save these settings as a configuration that you can reuse later. And actually, this is not just about freelance translators, because supporting zip files also means that we are taking a big step towards supporting various package formats, for example, of CMS systems like Schema 4. These package formats are typically zip files with documents to translate in them and some additional files. And for those package formats that memoQ don't directly support yet, the zip filter will mean a step in the direction of automating all this manual hassle. And I will also try to show this. I really hope that I will show it in a good way. First, I think I will go ahead and import the file. So import with options. I have a zip file here. And when you import a zip file into memoQ, you are faced with a choice whether to just import it with the zip filter directly, and which just enables you to import the contents of the zip file, selecting what files to import and which files to skip. For example, in this case, I would definitely want to skip 2 of these files because I don't want to translate images in this case, and I don't want to translate this meqbkf file, which is some memoQ backup file. So I can define this here. So this is what the zip filter configuration contains. Practically not much more than choosing what to import and what not to import. If you want to go one step further and also define how to import each of those files, I mean going ahead and also choosing the right configuration file for all Word files included, then instead of the zip filter, you will use a so-called composite filter oh, no, I think that's not the right one, but I can switch. Neither this one. Okay. Then I will, instead of choosing one, I will show you how to create one. So I'm going to the resource console and click create filter for embedded documents. And here, after giving a name to my configuration, I need to tell this filter that this is for zip filters. And here you see a big list of all file types memoQ supports. And in our case, we are interested in Microsoft Word files of the newer versions, and say that either we want to import them with the default settings or go with another one like importing track changes. So now I have a so-called composite filter or filter for embedded documents, and now I can use this to import my zip file again. Again, if I want to choose settings for specific file types, and I use the composite filter instead of the zip filter, and I can take a look now. Yes, so this is a composite filter for zip filters, and for embedded Word files, these are the settings that will be used. This might be requiring a little bit getting used to, but I think this gives a lot of flexibility to working with zip files. And when you click the structure button, you will see which files came from your zip files and which were imported from some other sources. Okay, we also have a number of other improvements that I do not want to talk about, like small improvements for Excel files, multilingual Excel files, Word files. And there is another big thing, a last one that I want to talk about, and this is about server-to-server workflows. More specifically, this is about cases when there is a customer and the vendor, for example, a large translation company and a smaller translation company that works for them, both of them having their own memoQ servers. We've been working to improve their workflows or package-based workflows. More specifically, the big thing that we added is translation memory sharing for translation lookup. What happens here is that the customer, or let's call it the user of the parent server, can decide to share a TEM with their vendor company, which means that the customer company keeps full ownership of the translation memory. They do not need to give the translation memory to their vendor, but they can enable the vendor company to use that TM. And what happens is that translators, so those people at the end of the chain, when they start working on their memoQ project, which comes from the vendor's memoQ server, they can get translation memory hits from the customer's memoQ server and the translation memory there. So this is one improvement to the package-based workflow between memoQ servers, and another one is for the delivery of such a project. So the vendor company can now deliver such a project with one click online to the customer company. So to give the whole story, it starts with a project created on the customer's memoQ server. They set up a project, they create a package for the vendor company. The vendor receives the package. If the customer wants, the vendor can use their translation memories directly, and the vendor can then carry out a normal memoQ project. It doesn't have to be package-based for the translators, so that might be something that is easy to get wrong. So it can be a plain old online project from that point, which is probably more efficient with the actual translators. And when all translators are finished, they deliver back to the vendor company, and the vendor company can also deliver with a single click back to the customer company. Okay, and I think these are all the topics that I wanted to cover, and I managed to remain within my half an hour limit. I hope there are some exciting questions that Gonzalo can read out for me.
Yes, we have quite a lot of questions. Let me start with one from Dennis Hay. He's asking whether the zip filter is also usable with content connectors.
I'm quite certain that at this point it is not, but it's a good question. Honestly, I do not know the answer, but a strong guess is that it's not available there yet. But I think for all those questions that I cannot fully answer, I would like to get back, or our team will get back to you with answers after the webinar and in the coming days.
There is one from Dave, and he's asking whether forbidden terms are still exported in the same column as permitted terms. And there is a second part to this question which says, when sending a term-based list to a client, this often causes problems as he then thinks they are allowed. As he then thinks they are allowed, I think he meant.
Okay, this is something that I didn't mention, but for example, if you export to Excel, unless something is wrong here. Let me create a simple term base there. So what I wanted to say, I probably don't want to show it right now, but in the Excel export, all forbidden terms will receive a red color. And also, if you make changes in Excel, if you use red coloring, then those terms that you have made red will be imported as forbidden as well. So basically, we are extending this feature to Excel exports. And Gonzalo, I'm not sure I understood the other part of the question. Maybe it was related to this.
Yeah, I think he was just clarifying a situation where this was useful. So that was just it. Let me follow with another question from Stefan Weimar. He says, regarding QTerm, when are we going to tackle the problems with user permissions? And he means that you can address these passions to all users who ever had access to a term base, even if they are currently without any access right.
Actually, the topic of permissions is a real complex one, already inside QTerm, but in memoQ server in general. I can tell you that we have huge plans there, so we have definitely not forgotten this topic. I think it's probably safe to say that we are going to address QTerm permissions and hopefully also memoQ server permissions in general later this year.
There is another question from Sandra. She's asking whether the zip filter works also with Visio files.
Which files?
Since it's also a kind of zip format. Visio files. It's
Visio.
VIS. Yeah.
DIS. Actually. So practically it will work with any file format that is zip based. So for example, I just talked to my colleague Veronica Pandi, who's been maintaining the development work around and the product work around the zip filter, and she said that she likes to import actual Word files with the zip filter because they are also zip files technically. And then she likes to play around with all the various files inside those. So as long as it is technically a zip file and there is something to pick up there for translation, it is possible.
Another question which says, when will memoQ become compatible with other CMS formats as WordPress? So I think that person already knows that we have released a WordPress connector.
Well, we are working on supporting further CMS systems as we speak. Probably or hopefully you will be able to see some level of support for further CMS systems already with 8.5. Also, I think even when I talked about 8.3, I mentioned that we are building an SDK to enable third parties to build support for further CMS systems. This is not forgotten either. We are finalizing that SDK and we are hoping to be able to make it public soon.
Okay, there is another question from Rebecca Sanchez. She's asking whether it is possible to extract terms from translation memories.
I think it was always possible in memoQ since the term extractor was there. I think it is a feature that has been there for a while.
Okay, so let's do one more question. There are quite many questions here now, and the others we will answer them later on, but let's do one more. This one is from Juliette McCann, and she's asking, will it be possible to set a hierarchy for the TMs as for the templates to search in order?
Well, maybe sometime in the future. So this is, at this point, a feature request. We haven't made any kind of changes in this regard for 8.4. Yeah, hope maybe sometime in the future. I cannot promise anything.
Okay, so Dennis Hayes is sharing some comments there. He says that we can already set penalties for TMs.
Yeah, that's true. So same thing I was thinking. Dennis is right, as always.
Okay. I think we can end this session now. All of the other questions which have not been answered, we promise to take a look at them and raise it to our team, and we will get back to you and also share the recording of the webinar. So if you need to check anything again, you will be able to do that.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice rest of the day.
Okay. Thank you for attending, guys. Goodbye.